There are 400,000 members of the Hotel and Restaurant Workers Union, waiters and waitresses, busboys, bartenders, most of whom work long, hard hours for not much pay. And they have a further difficulty in their lives: organized crime in their union, the mob in the restaurants. Brian Ross has been looking into the affairs of the Hotel and Restaurant Workers Union, and here is the first of 2 reports on the subject.
Cleveland, 1977. A struggle for power in the mafia leads to a wave of violence, car bombings, murders. This man was in the middle of it all, a hired killer for the mob, now a federal witness. He says part of his payoff for the killings in Cleveland was a job with a labor union, the Hotel and Restaurant Employees Union.
You were involved in a mob killing in Cleveland.
Yes.
A contract, a hit, as they call it.
That's what they call it.
And as a result of that, what happened?
As a result of that, I got a job with the union, and I was told, thanks for doing the job. It was a long time coming, so we're going to do this for you.
And they gave you a job with the Hotel Restaurant Workers Union.
Yes.
Federal investigators say this man is just one of many gunmen and hoodlums who have been given jobs as business agents and organizers in the Hotel and Restaurant Employees Union. The headquarters of the union is on the 13th floor of this building in downtown Cincinnati. No one at union headquarters would agree to be interviewed by NBC News for this report. NBC News has obtained a copy of a confidential report on labor racketeering prepared by the Justice Department for the White House. The report describes the Hotel and Restaurant Employees Union as a union completely dominated by organized crime, a domination made possible, the report says, by the Chicago mob's control of top officers in the union. This is the top man in the union, Ed Hanley, the international president. The Justice Department report on the union says, quote, Ed Hanley represents the classic example of an organized crime takeover of a major labor union, unquote. Hanley's office is in Cincinnati, but federal authorities say Hanley spends most of his time here in Palm Springs, California, where he has an expensive house and a union jet at his disposal. Authorities say Hanley is often seen here with major organized crime figures. On this day, Hanley, on the right in this picture, played golf with Frank the Horse Buccieri. Buccieri is well known to authorities as a high-ranking Chicago mafia figure who has now moved to Palm Springs. Authorities say Hanley, a former Chicago bartender, was handpicked for his position in the union by the Chicago mob. In one Justice Department report, investigators said, quote, the union's general treasury is being looted for the benefit of Hanley's group and associated organized crime elements, unquote. The 400,000 members of the union, waitresses, busboys, and bartenders, pay in millions of dollars a year in dues money to the general treasury. When Hanley became president of the union in 1973, there was $22 million in the general treasury. Authorities say in the next 4 years, the union gave out more than $7 million in questionable loans, and another $7.5 million was spent for a union airplane and to hire dozens of new union organizers.
I was an organizer and a business agent.
Federal authorities say the union has put together what amounts to a goon squad. When this man worked for the union in Cleveland, he says the union had little trouble getting its way with a hotel or restaurant owner.
You talk to the owner when nobody's around. You go talk to him and say, why don't you want to fill this contract? And threatening his family, say, well, you know, you got wife and kids, and you got this, you got that, you got a nice business, you don't want to lose it. There could be fires, there could be, one comes out to the parking lot, you know, he could be hit on the head or whatever, and...
Is this a standard practice in the union?
Sure, it's a standard practice, yeah. It's been like that since it begun, and it's going to be like that until it ends.
Despite the mob's alleged domination of the Hotel Restaurant Employees Union, the union is a member in good standing in the AFL-CIO. Authorities say the late George Meany was angered by what was going on in the union, and at one point, Meany ordered a cleanup of the union. But there has been no cleanup. And Ed Hanley, who authorities say was handpicked by the Chicago mob, is a member of the AFL-CIO Executive Council and president of the country's 15th biggest labor union. Ed Hanley would not agree to be interviewed on camera by NBC News. But in a phone call late last week, Hanley said his union was well run, and he denied that either he or the union were controlled by the mob. Hanley said that any meetings he has had with reputed mobsters were either coincidence or social, and had nothing to do with the union. In our next report, the story of waitresses in Oakland, California, who say the union tried to force them into prostitution. Brian Ross, NBC News.
And finally this evening, the second part of Brian Ross's investigation of the Hotel and Restaurant Employees Union. Last night, we saw how the union's treasury diminished in size after its leadership was taken over by people associated with organized crime figures. Tonight, we see how rough it could be for some of the female members of the union. Brian Ross.
These men have a lot to say about how business is done in the major resort and convention cities of this country. They are top officers of the Hotel and Restaurant Employees Union, a union with 400,000 members, and a union law enforcement authorities say has been taken over by the mafia. These pictures were made at the union's last convention in Palm Springs, California. Authorities say the president of the union, Ed Hanley, and at least 8 of his top associates were handpicked for their union jobs by organized crime. At this convention, the sergeant-at-arms was John Lardino, himself a reputed major organized crime figure from Chicago. In city after city, federal investigators say the people who run hotels and restaurants have had to deal with union officers who often are hoodlums, arsonists, and gunmen. In Miami 2 years ago, violence, a hotel bombing during a union organizing drive run by this man, Herbert Pinky Schiffman, who police say left Miami after a rival union faction bombed his car. In Las Vegas, Al Bramlett was head of the Hotel and Restaurant Employees Local until he was murdered by 2 of his own thugs, who said Bramlett didn't pay them for a restaurant firebombing job. Law enforcement authorities say the owners of hotels and restaurants go along with union hoodlums because they are afraid of labor trouble or violence. Some hotel executives we talked with insisted they had good relations with the union, but no one from any of the big hotel chains we contacted, Hilton, Hyatt, Sheraton, Holiday Inn, would agree to talk on camera about the union. And authorities say members of the union are often afraid to complain or do anything about corrupt union bosses. But in Oakland, California, one union boss got in trouble because a few waitresses in his union wouldn't go along with his demands. This is Karen Cerritas, an engineering student working her way through college as a waitress. She says the man who ran the union local here told her she would have to have sex with him and with other top officers of the union if she wanted a good job as a waitress at a restaurant where the tips were high. Karen Cerritas belonged to Hotel Restaurant Workers Local 28 in Oakland. This is the man who ran the union, Ray Lane, who got his job in the union despite serving time in prison for armed robbery. It is Lane who Karen Cerritas says demanded sexual favors in return for a good job. Lane would not talk to NBC News about the allegations. Karen Cerritas and 2 other waitresses took Lane to court in a civil suit with help from the National Right to Work organization.
He wanted me to service conventions as a prostitute, work fun trains to Reno with business associates of his.
What's a fun train to Reno?
Apparently, businessmen charter this train to Reno and have prostitutes on board for their entertainment during the ride up.
Another waitress in the case, Terry DeLoche, says she first met Lane when she went to the union for help in a job dispute.
All he talked about was sex. Sex with him, sex with other people, sex with animals, sex with women, sex with, you know, everything under the sun that he could think of that I should have sex with. That's what he talked about.
How old were you?
18.
And you wanted a job in a restaurant.
Yes.
And he talked to you about sex for 2 hours, sex jobs.
Yes, involving large sums of money. He mentioned underworld connections while he was talking about it. He didn't use the word mafia, he just used the word underworld.
He was trying to make me think that if I didn't work as a prostitute for him, I would not work at all.
Last month, a judge in Oakland ruled in favor of Karen Cerritas and Terry DeLoche and ordered Ray Lane and the union local to pay a total of $275,000 in damages. Lane still will not talk about the case, but during the trial he testified that Karen Cerritas and Terry DeLoche were lying about him and that he never tried to turn them into prostitutes. Last Friday, Ray Lane resigned his position with the union Next month, he will begin serving a prison sentence for a conviction on charges of embezzlement of union funds.
What would upset me more than the offers of prostitution was the fact that the man was using this this organization,
The union.
for his own pleasure, for his own financial rewards.
I think waitresses need a union more than most groups of people need a union. And the unions that they get are more corrupt than the employers.
Karen Cerritos quit the union because of what happened to her. But authorities say in most major cities, thousands of other waitresses, busboys, and hotel employees still must work under the rules of union locals run by hoodlums. Brian Ross, NBC News, Oakland, California.